Well, ta-da! Apparently, a sewing needle is just the same as a needle on a record player. And if you can, spin your record and drag the needle along those grooves, you can end up hearing the sound. So, yeah, some people are more fixed in their approach to objects than other people. Some people are really flexible in certain arenas of like how to solve a problem, with objects, and other people in other arenas might be better. I'm thinking of like the farmer who doesn't have access to a mechanic may have to figure out a way to sort of put this together so that the machinery will still work while they're harvesting or whatever. They might have to be really flexible in their solutions in that situation, but they might not be as flexible in, let's say, I don't know, how to use some other object to cook a meal or something like that. So, you might be more fixed in one arena than another, stuff like that. So, functional fixedness. All right. Here's another example that comes from a research study where college student participants were provided with these materials: a bulletin board, a table, a thumbtack, a candle, which was not lit at the time. This is just a demonstration in this cartoon, and then a box of matches. And they were told to figure out some way to attach the candle to the bulletin board in a way that it could safely burn. So you couldn't just like put the thumbtack through the wick and say, ta-da, I did it. Or some students actually lit a match, softened the wax on the end of the candle, embedded the thumbtack into that, and then tacked it so that it technically was like horizontal. That's not actually the solution. Or they'd soften the side of the candle with the match and embed the thumbtack into the side of the candle. A little dangerous to have the flame that close to the board. So those aren't the correct solutions. There's actually a really simple and easy solution where you actually use the thumbtack to attach the box of matches to the bulletin board, and then you melt a little bit of wax onto the top of the box of matches so that you can sort of glue the candle to that, and then now you have a little candle holder. Most of the students ultimately came up with that solution where they figured out how to attach that box of matches, but the researchers found that there were factors that helped to really break the functional fixedness faster. Like if you referred to the box of matches as a box containing matches, it helped to separate the box from the matches faster for students. They were much more likely to realize they could take the lid off, dump the matches, and use it as a container. So there are like contextual cues that could be present that would help the person to solve the problem. And that's, I think, a really important note in the real world, right? Like sometimes there are cues that help us to figure out, oh, you know what I could use for that is, and then other times those cues are absent, and it would be contingent on you to be searching your memory for some other object that might help you out in this situation. And maybe your memory isn't offering the very object that would work. You know what I mean? Like this is not just a simple problem solving task. It's also part of memory. And so there can be a lot of factors that go into why we display this kind of functional fixedness. Another obstacle to problem solving: confirmation bias. This is our tendency to seek information that confirms our existing beliefs. Not only do we seek information that confirms our existing beliefs, I would like to add on the ancillary detail, which is, and we like actively avoid information that would refute our existing beliefs. Like we don't want to hear it. We only want to find information that confirms what we already believe. So here's a cartoon from Dilbert. She says, let's begin the meeting, but be aware that I'm documenting all of your bullying behavior. And he says, I'm not even close to being a bully, but now your confirmation bias will make everything I say sound like bullying to you. She's like, click, click, click. Can you repeat the part after you implied I'm a delusional witch? This is a problem in psychology when you're a clinician. Oftentimes, once you already know what the diagnosis is, everything the person does confirms your diagnosis. There's nothing they can do that would really shake the confidence that you have in that diagnosis. I mean, it's a powerful tendency to see things through the lens of only searching for what you want to see, right? So in social judgments, I thought I'd give you an example of confirmation bias in social judgments. So let's say that you're the judge on a custody trial, and parent A has average income, average health, average working hours, a reasonable rapport with the child, and a relatively stable social life. Whereas parent B has above average income, minor health problems, lots of work-related travel, a very close relationship with the child, and an extremely active social life. Who do you award primary custody to? Well, parent B turned out to be the most common choice for awarding custody and the most common choice for denying custody, depending on how the problem was phrased. So who would you award custody to? The most common choice was parent B. Who would you deny custody to? The most common choice was parent B. So parent B is obviously standing out with their characteristics being, if you're looking for reasons to award custody, you're going to notice that they have a very close relationship with the child, that they have above average income, so they may be able to support the child better. So you may focus on those things. You may, while trying to decide who to award the child to, say that parent A only has a reasonable rapport with the child, right? And a relatively stable social life. And so you might be thinking, well, parent B has characteristics that are advantageous. Parent A has ones that could be disadvantageous. So I would go parent B. If you are asked, who would you deny custody to? You might say, well, parent B has some health problems, whereas parent A doesn't. Parent B has to travel a lot. And parent B has a lot of, very active social life. And so maybe leaving the child with, sorry about my goose honking in the background, extremely active social life. So they may leave the child with a babysitter or something. So I feel like parent A would probably be the more, stable. So I would deny. If my decision is to decide who to deny it to, I'm noticing all these things wrong with parent B when that's my perspective, is to look for reasons to deny. So the fact that parent B is both the one that you would give and also the one you would deny, depending on how the question was framed, kind of supports the idea that you're looking for information to confirm your biased view of who should get custody in a situation like this. So confirmation bias affects how we seek information. They had another study where half of the participants were asked to determine whether their classmates are extroverted. So their assignment was determine whether your classmates are extroverted. And they generated questions such as, what would you do if you wanted to liven things up at a party? So in their little survey that they designed to try and determine whether their classmates were extroverted, they asked questions that would elicit extroverted questions. And not surprisingly, they came to the conclusion that their classmates were primarily extroverts. When the other group was assigned to determine whether classmates are introverted, they tended to generate questions like, what factors make it really hard for you to open up to people? And oddly enough, with the list of questions that were biased towards finding evidence of introversion, they came to the conclusion that most of their classmates were introverts, even though it was the same group of people who took both surveys. So they both can't be right. There was clearly a bias in what they were searching for, and the respondents responded honestly, probably, but the questions that elicited evidence of extroversion got evidence of extroversion. The ones that elicited evidence of introversion got introversion. So we collect information in a biased way because of the confirmation bias. I'm reading this book called The Death of Expertise, and it's talking about how because of confirmation bias and the internet, we can all find evidence that we're right. No matter what crackpot idea we might have, we can all find evidence that we're right. And that's really a problem because we all hold our rightness very strongly. We have found evidence from somewhere that what we believe is correct, and we're not willing to let it go. I had to get off of Facebook because of these kinds of things, because people would post information that if you even remotely ask them any detail about, like, where did you get this and why do you believe it kinds of questions, the animosity. So I just got off of Facebook I won't get on any of the social media platforms anymore because I'm like, nope. Now to transition a little bit, let's talk about creativity and problem solving. Creativity, a lot of times we use the word creativity to talk about like artistic things or like that, but really in psychology we refer to creativity as the production of novel ideas which are relevant and practical. So we're not necessarily talking about, maybe the layperson's use of the word creativity. We're talking about, thinking outside the box. Like it really is about coming up with novel solutions, kind of the opposite of functional fixedness, right? Now, Guilford's approach to defining creativity is that there are two kinds of creativity. There's what we call convergent creativity, where we use cues out in the world to help us to derive the one right answer. And then there's divergent creativity, where we use the cue that's been provided to help us generate our own novel responses. So generally, when we're thinking, like us regular people, when we think about creativity, I think we typically think about divergent creativity. We think about the ability to come up with our own responses to some prompt, right? Like, what could you do with a paperclip? And you're supposed to come up with all the novel responses you could come up with for what you could do with a paperclip. That's divergent creativity. Well, when I was in graduate school working on my master's degree, I worked with this professor whose name was Dr. Doolittle. I'm not kidding. And he was really interested in divergent creativity. Typically, we measure divergent creativity by the quantity of ideas that the person comes up with, the originality of the ideas that they come up with, the importance or relevance of the ideas that they come up with. Dr. Doolittle was interested in teaching children how to think in this much more, divergent way. He first used these riddles. He called them Dr. Do-riddles, and he made books about them and sold them. They're really cool. I use them on my children to help them to develop their creativity. So these riddles are actually examples of convergent creativity, but then he had these follow-up training exercises that would help build divergent creativity. But I wanted to share with you some of the little riddles that he developed. So it says, I'm the boxer's stage or found on a finger. I make the phone shake if you're slow or linger. What am I? Now, these were designed for 3rd through 6th graders, so hopefully they're solvable. The correct answer there is ring. I drop from the clouds, a king's term of rule. The northernmost deer, think Santa, not mule. What am I? So that should be rain. And then this one says, a lace with no frills, a tongue with no talk, a pair that just waits while you find a sock. What am I? And that should be shoe. All right, so by using these sort of convergent creativity exercises, he was able to sort of establish where they were with their creativity. And then he had exercises for helping to build divergent reasoning, where he was helping them to figure out, how to brainstorm possible solutions to the riddle, or how to, generate a bunch of different ideas and then narrow it down to those that might fit the clues and stuff like that. So in Dr. Doolittle's implementation of Guilford's approach, he used the convergent riddles to then help children to develop their divergent reasoning in the long run. Obviously, he took the perspective that creativity can be taught, right? And that's a big debate in psychology. Can we teach creativity, or is that something that's innate? Some of the things that we know that inhibit creativity in individuals would be knowing that the results are going to get judged. Even my mom's entering a watercolor contest, and she went and looked at the juror who's going to be judging the pieces, and she saw the kind of work he creates, and she goes, well, I don't make anything like that. And I'm like, well, I don't think he expects you to be doing his kind of style, but knowing that she's going to be judged is kind of inhibiting her creativity in that way. Like, she's supposed to be painting a landscape from a particular location, and everybody's going to be all outside, plein air painting. And so they all have to be in the same basic area. So how is she going to make hers different or stand out or whatever? And knowing that her creativity, her production is going to be judged is really inhibiting, right? It's hard not to be inhibited by that. It turns out that if your IQ is significantly higher than 120 or significantly less than 80, there is a tendency towards lower creativity. Now, it is field specific. Like among engineers, the average IQ is above 120, and engineers tend to display a lot of creativity. So it is field dependent. Like some fields have average IQs that are higher and still have creativity displayed. But on average, if you're a regular person just walking around, it's not necessarily to your benefit to have a significantly higher IQ, which a lot of people think that that's true. It's not true. Higher IQ is not necessarily perpetually correlated with greater creativity. Things that increase creativity would be that brainstorming that I was telling you that Dr. Doolittle was trying to train children how to do using those riddles. Another thing that increases creativity is working alone, because you're probably less likely to be judging yourself. You're more likely to actually implement ideas, try them, see if they fail, those kinds of things. Whereas when you're in a group, you may feel inhibited about sharing an idea. You may be worried about your idea failing, things like that. So they've actually found that a person who decides, I'm going to generate all the ideas that I possibly can without judgment. That's what we call brainstorming. They tend to generate more ideas. If they start judging their ideas, then that inhibits creativity. Working alone, they tend to generate more ideas. They tend to test more of their ideas, and they tend to end up with more creative outcomes than if they work with a group. Groups tend to come up with sort of more pedestrian and serviceable solutions. Individuals tend to come up with more cutting edge solutions. All right, this is a good time to break because we're going to shift over into reasoning in the next segment.